better. So at this moment on, if you've got any questions while I'm working, you can put them in the chat box. So for our new ladies, if you hover I'm on my laptop. So if I hover my mouse towards the bottom of the screen of the laptop, I get a list of options: mute, video, participants, chat. And if you click on the chat box, it's then you can type in your question if you've got a pressing question. And as long as I see it, I will be able to reply straight away. But if not, at the end of the recording bit, the sort of formal teaching bit, I will take you all off mute. So those of you who've already said you need to leave early, if you're still around then, I can make a point of coming to you first if you've got a few minutes just to, if you want to ask your questions live, so to speak. And other than that, we will then afterwards make and create together. I'll finish off my piece and you can work with your piece. So perhaps give me an idea, type a yes in the chat box if you are thinking of staying on later. Just gives me an idea of who's doing what. And while you're doing that, shall I show you my flowers from last week I've got on the side? Of course, they were carnations and they're going to last for absolutely ever. So we'll have to see how long they do last. I reckon it's going to be about 3 weeks or so. So I'm getting some yeses in the chat box, which is lovely. I'm just going to reach across the last week's flowers. So we made a heart-shaped bouquet for Valentine's Day. So it's probably a good time now, as your flowers are going to be a week old, those of you who came to class last time around, if you haven't done so already, that you'll need to recut your stems and refresh the water. And what I thought I would do, I can't quite work out which way's up there, that as Valentine's Day is over, I thought I would just manipulate my flowers a little bit and turn it back into a circle. Do you remember we started off with a circle last week? Because, you know, it's not Valentine's Day anymore, and I can just, you know, get a longer life out of it instead of it looking as if it's left over. So I can just spend a few moments throwing that around and sitting in front of the mirror, standing in front of the mirror, just to make sure I've got the perfect shape. And then my stems were really long on my flowers because I bought my carnations from the florist shop. And to be honest, they've been a little bit unwieldy. So what I might do this time when I come and cut the stems is I might not just daintily recut the end of the stems like that. I might just go right the way through the middle, all the way through, and make them much shorter, and then it's a much more usable size bouquet. So I'm just going to let these bits of stem clatter off to my bin at the side like that, and I'm actually going to put my flowers in my bin as well, but I will have to remember to take them out because I need to swish my vase around and my water around. Yeah, comments on the chat box. It's much easier to work when the stems are slightly shorter. So if you bought your flowers from the supermarket, they would have been slightly smaller, shorter than mine. And the problem I had, like you probably, is you were working with quite long stems and trying to maneuver them around. So sometimes it's much easier to do your flower arranging when you are standing up. So before we go on to this week's class, just a warm welcome to our new ladies in class today. And we've got one of them with us here today and another one who I know is going to be catching up on the video afterwards. So perhaps just by a way of hello and welcome, I'm Julie, your host for today, and I am sitting in my kitchen in the southeast of England on a rather gloomy day, a bit of wind. It's just gone very dark and we've got some rain coming through. So the format for class is that I have already put you on mute. I've spotlit my video, so it's just me that you see on your screen. And I will take you through the demonstration of what we're going to do. And then afterwards, as I say, take you off mute. And if at any point you do need to leave the class, it's perfectly fine with me. If you find that red button that says leave meeting, you can click it at any time. If you wanted to rejoin or your text gone a bit funny, just that system of rebooting the computer kind of thing. If you can't hear properly, or you know, I'm freezing or anything like that, if you try leaving the meeting and then re-clicking the link that you clicked originally, hopefully, fingers crossed, that will sort everything out. But if all else fails, I do send the recording out afterwards, and you'll be able to keep that and re-watch that at your leisure. Now, let's talk about next week. Now, normally at this point, I bring some things on to the stage and show you what we're going to be doing next week. And I can't. I was going to go out to the shops this morning and I had woke up with a migraine this morning, so I haven't been out of the house at all today. Next week, though, we're going to be making a hay arrangement, quite a modern, long, low, sort of snaking style of arrangement. And this will be perfect. The mechanics, what we're going to be doing, is if you want to go foam free. So you've got two options here. One, you can stick with your traditional flower foam, and we're going to wrap that up and hide it in a sort of, I don't want to say basket, but it's a hay, sort of hay bale, long and thin. Or you could use moss, and you can make a little pocket of moss to go inside your hay. Now, those of you who came to the Christmas classes, do you remember the cinnamon box that we made? I would say if you've got that in your mind, that think hay, that'll give you an idea of the approximate size. It's going, you decide how long it's going to be. I'm thinking something quite narrow, and then it's going to be about the construction of the container for next week. And really, you're going to end up with just this little pocket for your fresh flowers, your silk flowers, your dried flowers, or your Easter bling, whatever you want to put onto your arrangement. So I will send out the handout for next week with today's video, and as you've already paid for class, when you pay for the full 9 sessions, you will have had the full booklet, but just in case you've lost it, I will send that out to you again. So on with this week, I've called this week's project a nest of spring flowers, and the vital ingredient for this one is some stems, some twigs that got a bit of movement to them. So I have got some silver birch twigs, and the reason mine are curled round, practically looking like a nest already, is because when I pick them up from the floor, the easiest way to carry them home is to make them a circle, and then I put them in my shopping bag. I thought a bit of a twit walking home with them from the middle of town. It may be that you don't have silver birch, but you could use any pliable stem. So this could be the stems from a weeping willow tree. It could be the soft stems of a contorted willow or a hazel. I'm looking out over my patio. I've got Virginia creeper and clematis. Just something that you can fashion round into a circle without it snapping. And I find silver birch is quite a nice thing to use. It sort of looks Easterish. Well, for me, it's freely available because I do know where the silver birch trees are in town, and especially weather like this, a bit windy, that they do fall off really easily. So I've just picked these up from underneath the tree, which is outside our doctor's surgery. So doing my bit for tidying up the local environment. The other thing that you'll need is bind wire. So if you've been following along with me for a while, you know that I love this. This is a tan colour. I did have, perhaps I've put that away. It comes in a green, and I've used a red at Christmas time. So it looks like string, but it's paper covered wire. And I like using this because it's decorative and it's functional. So I will be able to tie my structure together. Instead of making lots of knots, I'll be able to twist tie together. It just saves your hands, really. And then off to the side, one other vital ingredient is I've got a bowl to put my flowers in, because that's going to sit inside my nest. And then I have got tape, because I'm not going to use flower foam this week. You could use flower foam. If you're a flower foam fan, you could put a piece of flower foam in here and arrange your flowers. But because, things are changing with flower arranging, we're trying to be a bit more environmentally friendly. It's quite nice sometimes to try and go back to the old methods of not using flower foam. So I've got the pot tape that you might recognise if you're used to arranging flowers in flower foam. That's what you use to keep your flowers in place. I have then got a little dish here, because I'm going to put my finished arrangement onto a dish, because what we're going to end up with is the pot. And then it's going to have this nest. It's a bit like a cuff, imagine a really chunky bangle. So you may find that when you come to pick it up, actually your bowl slides through the hole in the bottom of your nest. Hence, if you have got a saucer or some kind of decorative, container, it may even be the saucer from a terracotta pot, something like that. It'll just be handy if you want to move it from the kitchen table to the dining room, that the whole structure isn't going to fall apart. And then as it's spring, I have got some spring flowers, but as I say, I wasn't able to go out and replenish my sauces this morning. I have got some odds and ends here. I've got 2 tulips, two hyacinths, and some buds of freesia, and a tiny bit of greenery. And then I have gone and into my silk flower stash, and I've picked out some flowers. These are not seasonal at all. We've got some peony buds and some roses, and I've kept to the flowers that although they're not spring flowers, they're in that spring colour palette. So if you are arranging flowers for the springtime, for Easter time, it's a matter of, you've got options. You either pick something that is seasonal, special at this time of the year, or perhaps to go for that pastel colour palette and then mix in flowers that are available all year round. So I think the picture I showed you as the sort of sample had ranunculus in it. And I know one of you has gone off and got some silk ranunculus because you felt that they were a bit too expensive. But it's just whatever you've got to hand. And it may be you, perhaps today you want to concentrate on a technique and you want to add your flowers in at another time. So just do what you can and try not to stress too much. So I'm going to, I think most of today's class is going to be the overhead camera today. It's going to get a little bit messy. There's going to be twigs flying all over the place. And I'm just hearing my husband coming back from the dog walk, and I've forgotten to close the kitchen door. So hopefully he will come in and do that very discreetly, and then we won't get put off by barking dogs in the corner. So I shall move my bits and pieces out of the way and then come in with the overhead camera and show you what I'm going to be doing. So perhaps the first thing I will do is to show you how I'm going to make my grid to go across my container. We're sort of starting at the end of the project. So with my tape, I've got quite a wide tape here. So you can get a narrower tape as well. It doesn't matter what you use at all. I'm stretching it out across my container and leaving myself a couple of centimetres. I've got dark tape on a black bowl. You probably can't see it. It's a couple of centimetres, or a centimetre and a half at the end. And I'm going to make a zigzag, a sort of noughts and crosses pattern. But can you see here, I'm going quite close to the next piece of tape. That is because my spring flowers are just a single stem with a single flower. And I want to make sure that my flowers stay upright in my bowl and they don't slop around to the sides. It may be that if you've got bushier materials, you might decide just to go 3 strips one way and 4 the other, something like that. So don't just think about it really before you get going, how big or small you need to leave your gaps across the edge. So I am going quite tape heavy on this, and then twist it around 90 degrees and do the same thing the other way around. And you make to make sure that your bowl is dry. If you try to use this tape on a bowl that's wet, it won't stick properly. I'm just making sure that I catch down the sides so it's not going to lift up. And you can imagine what I'm going to do at the end. The arranging the flowers at the end is the easy bit. I'm just going to poke it through the holes. But that is my bowl all set and ready to go with my foam-free option. So I'm going to set it aside, but not too far away, because I want to make sure my nest will take the bowl. So you do need to do a little bit of measuring up in order that you don't end up with a nest that's too small or one perhaps that is too big and too gappy. So let's just slide that across for the moment and then bring in my twigs. Right, twigs here. We've got this nice supple end, the fine points, and as you work your way down to the end of the twigs, they get a little bit woodier and a bit stiffer. And you may well find, as mine just did then, that if they're too dry or too stiff, they will break apart. So what I like to do is to start at the fine end of my my twigs, where I know they're going to curl around a little bit. So I probably picked these up probably a week ago. They've been sitting in my workshop in the cool. The fresher they are, the more pliable they are. And if you were making a project like this, you know, in the height of the summer and you weren't able to get hold of the twigs, you can use a willow and soak it in the bath, and that'll make it pliable again. So you may need to work your way around. Now I've got an advantage here, because when I picked my twigs up, because I took them home in that coil, they have got this natural curve, and depending on what twigs you've got, you may need to go through and just gently play with them in your hand just to ease round a little bit. So bringing my bowl back into view, I then need to work my way around and just work out how big a circle I need to create for my first round of twigs. So I've probably, obviously my bowl is, the opening at the top is wider than the base. So I've probably gone just the same amount around the top here. So holding that steady, I can then start to tie this together. Now, if you've ever made a twiggy door wreath, you would probably have taken your stems and you would have sort of sewn them, woven them in and out. And I'm not going to do that because I want to make a wall of twigs coming up at the side. And that's where my paper covered wire comes in. So I'm going to reel this off from the middle, to myself one long piece, and then I'm going to trim it down to size. So probably I should have done this before I started twiddling with my twigs because I've got to hold those in place. I'm going to go for 3 bits of wire. You may want 4, it doesn't matter how many pieces you use. And I'm going to take one of those pieces of wire and put it underneath and wrap it round. So that's bound everything together. And once I've got this first bit of wire on, I can then let go and it's not going to ping around. So I've wrapped around just a couple of times, and then I'm going to twist the 2 ends together, and that will hold in place. So if you have problems with your fingers and you find it too difficult to twist your hands, you can hold there and spin the rest of the materials around if you find that easier. So I've got myself this circle, but it's a little bit wayward. So if I go round with my other and sort of tuck in my other pieces of twig, I can hold those down. So again, aiming for the middle of my piece of paper covered wire, I go round twice and then twist tied together. And perhaps this little bit over here, I can lash that into position as well. Now, because of the nature of the twigs, this is never going to be a totally smooth ring or nest, because what I'm using are twigs with lots of flyaway pieces. If you're using weeping willow, which is a much more streamlined look, you probably will get a nice neat finish, but I won't because of the materials I'm using here. So can you see that I've left my little bits of bind wire, my paper covered wire, I've left them up tall. So do the same thing, don't be tempted to cut them. And you can see here that this little twiggy bit is just pointing out in the wrong direction. You could cut this off now, but I tend to like doing my trimming right at the end. Otherwise, I find that once you get your scissors out, you can't stop. So I just think I'm going to trim that later, but I will save it for a little while. Then picking up your next twig. So again, I like to start with the nice fine pieces. So can you see that this wire has made a V shape? What I'm going to do is lie my twigs over that V shape and twist tie into position. And this is what makes your nest like a wall. So I'm not making it into a compact door wreath kind of shape. It's going to travel up with all these twist connections. So I can come around again and feed that down between the 2 little wires there. I've put 3 wires on here. If you find actually I can't get round in 3 wires, perhaps you've got a bigger container than me, or your twigs are a bit more unruly. It's going to snap that one there so it sits properly. It doesn't matter how many of these little little joining pieces you have with your wire. You could go 4, you could go 5, you could go 6, however many you want. Now I'm getting a bit chunky again, and actually that chunkiness has ended up exactly where that other chunky stem is. So I want to make sure that the nest looks sort of consistent all the way around. So let's get rid of those while they're distracting me. So I'm just going to cut away those 2 pieces, and we'll just try one more length. And then hopefully you will have got the idea of where we're going. So you could either use your twigs individually, or you could start to bundle them up together once you've got the idea of what you're doing. So I'm coming back to the soft, more pliable end of the stem, opening up the wires. Can you see them there, down there and up there? Sliding that in at the top and then twist tying it in place. So every time I'm going up, I started off with a loop around at the bottom. I've then got a couple of twists. It then goes up next to the next bundle, twists, bundle in, twists, bundle in. So I've ended up, I don't know if you can see, but actually with some gaps. I've got a line and then you can sort of see a space, a line, a space, a line, a space. And that's just the way I have my construction has worked. So if you didn't want to have such obvious spaces, where I've done 2 or 3 twists, you might just want to do 1 twist and pull it together. But I would say probably I would be more concerned about holding things in place than the number of twists that you were adding in. So you snake your way around. Now, before you get too carried away with the technique, I would suggest that every so often you put your bowl, your flower arranging container, back inside your hole, inside the nest, just to make sure that you're still on schedule for getting it to fit. You don't suddenly want to discover that you've either loosened your workings or they've gone very tight and you can't fit your bowl inside. So that looks about right. And you can see here that with my bowl, I've probably only gone halfway up. So I need to carry on and do much more to get level. But actually what I'm going to do is to take my stems up a little bit higher than the bowl. So in my best Blue Peter fashion, I have made one earlier so you can see where we're going. So here, this is just probably a couple of centimetres. If I lean across, I have got a bigger one all ready to show you. And as you work up, everything will become sturdier. Probably with those first 2 or 3 rounds, you might think, oh, this is going to be a bit loose and flimsy. But everything does start to hold together. And you can see here that I've put in some extra lengths of string. So I didn't stick to those 3 original placements. I put extra ties in as and when I needed them. So fingers crossed, this fits down the side. So you can see it fits down. I'm going to have my flowers hovering above. I've probably come a couple of centimetres higher. And I've ended up with these pieces of string right at the top. So if I wanted to come even taller, I could continue layering my pieces of string. And if you found that you've run out of the twists of wire, all you need to do is stitch your wire on and start up again. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to get in a tangle with really long lengths of the bind wire that then gets in your way. So this one, I'm quite pleased with the height. I will make sure I twist to hold it in place at the top. It's not going anywhere. And you could either cut the lengths really short. When I say really short, I mean a couple of centimetres. And then what I would do is bend over the top ends and roll it back down. And that just finishes it off like that. So you can barely see where the finish is. I wouldn't go too short though if you're cutting them, because you can run that risk that you're going to cut through the fixings. And then if you wanted to do something more decorative, you could keep your length long and do the same thing. You're sort of hiding that cut end and twisting it round, and you end up making a little decorative rose or a button. So I've got a question coming through. Oh, a couple of centimetres in answer. How far does it come above the bowl? I would say approximately a couple of centimetres. Perhaps if I've got it about there, my hand is holding it up. So top of the bowl is there, and it is literally just a couple of centimetres. So this is entirely up to you. If you really love this technique, you could make a whole column and a tower. And if you think, actually, this is the right old pain, you know, don't go up so high. But you would need to go, I would say you need to go at least level with your bulb. I would go a little bit higher because you don't want to be able to see the bulb that needs to be missing. So hopefully that is answering that. And then can you see here just that decorative finish at the top here? It's quite nice, but I don't feel it really fits in with the look of the nest of spring flowers. It's just a bit too decorative for me. So I am going to actually cut that off. But you've got options. The fixing tie is decorative and functional. So you decide what you want to do. I could have that little knot at the top there, or if I don't like it there, I just slide it over the edge and tuck it around. So same thing up over here. Make sure it's twisted together to hold on. Oops, can't remember which way I was twisting. nice and secure. And then the reason I roll the wires down on themselves is because I don't want to scratch myself. I just want it hidden out of the way. So the next thing to do with your fresh flowers would be to pour water into the bowl. So as you know, I hardly ever pour water into my flowers when I'm demonstrating, because when I come and move my flowers around, they do slop about all over the place. So I'm going to have to remember to add my flowers afterwards. And adding your flowers in is a matter of just scattering them to where you want to put them. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to take my flowers off the bowl, little presentation dish here, because I've also got some moss on this in my bowl. I'm going to get rid of the moss. I'm going to put my layer up like that. And do you remember me saying that the sides of my container, the nest, are quite gappy? So if you feel that they are too gappy, you could take some moss if you had them, or perhaps little bits of wool. And if you wanted to, you could feed them into the gaps, and it really does then start to look as if it's a proper looking bird's nest. And if you felt that some of these wispy bits at the edge were too out of control, you could go back and trim them, or you could hold them in and take some of the bind wire and just lash them closer into position. So these are just all added options, things you may or may not want to do. And then in terms of the flowers, if you've got greenery, and you don't need to have greenery for this arrangement, I would suggest you put the greenery in first of all, because it will help fill out the open surface of your bowl and really help you disguise that tape. So I've just got a few small bits of greenery, the pistache from a bouquet. So imagine I've got water in there. I would recut my stems and put my greenery in there. You can see straight away it's starting to fan out. Now, you just need to have a think before you cut your greenery as to how long it needs to be. So my breakfast bowl isn't very deep, but if you cut everything quite short, you may find that it starts to sink down the plug hole of the tape that you've made. So what I tend to do is keep my stems on the slightly longer side. And having said that, this stem's probably only about 10 centimeters long. And what I do is to slide it in sideways. And I just find that that locks in a little bit better. So instead of everything being upright like soldiers, things are radiating out from the middle a little bit more. Perhaps I can show you that more clearly with my my roses that I've cut short from another project. You could either put things in straight upright or to angle them slightly. And sometimes it's nice to have things upright, sometimes it's nice to have things angled, just so you can see them sort of poking out over the side of the container. So although this is a cuff going around your container, I would see if you can try and get a few flowers to break the edge of the container, just to come out a little bit. So perhaps some of your smaller pieces, these are buds of dahlias, I'm really messing my seasons up here, and just so it just rests over the edge of the container a little bit, and that starts to blend everything together. So instead of having the twiggy cuff and then the flowers on the top, you've got more of a blended style of arrangement. And then here I've got this really long, well, for me, a long stem on here. If you're using silk flowers, you could either cut this down, which means it's going to be short forever. You could always bend your flower stems up. And of course, you could be using dried flowers for this. And they're very fashionable at the moment. So I can push that through there, and that will just poke out over the top as well. And I've even got some little bits of eucalyptus and some dusty Miller greenery as well. So this is primarily the kind of arrangement you want to display on a low coffee table, so you can actually see all this lovely tapestry of what's going on. So as I have got my fresh flowers, I am going to intersperse those as well. They're being quite delicate. These are about a week old, these tulips. So I'm being very careful. Imagine I've got water in. I will be putting water in later. So I'm just going to slide those through. And because the holes between my tape were quite small, I am confident that these tulips are going to stay where I put them. If you do have big holes, oh, I've broken that one. It's obviously past its best there. If you do have large holes, it just means that you will struggle to get things to sit in the right place. They'll slop around a little bit. And that's where your greenery is good, because it gives another layer of sort of like a natural flower frog for holding and supporting your flowers in place. So I have got freesias here. As they've been maturing, I've been pinching off the faded blooms. I still like this little bit at the end. So whatever flowers you're using, it's still nice to think about what your focal flower is going to be. So that's my large roses, and then going down in size. So you've got a sort of small, medium and large in every arrangement you do, just to add a little bit of interest. And you just work your way through with your flowers, filling in the gaps. So it's probably as much as I'm going to add now. I will put my hyacinths in. They're just a little bit chunky, and I feel I need to be standing over it a little bit. So I will do that in our make and create session afterwards. So let me bring the camera back to me, and I'll lift the container up, and you can have a really good look at what I've been doing. So hopefully you've had a really good look from above, and I think probably the overhead shot was the best. As I try and pull this forwards to show you, it's all going to rock a little bit. So I haven't gone for any particular pattern at the top. I have just looked and got my biggest flowers in first of all, and then let's see if we can get the hyacinth in. So again, this hyacinth's a little bit old. I'll recut the stem. I'm just pinching off some of the lower florets in the same way you would if you had greenery and leaves coming off the side. I want to make sure that nothing is going to be dangling in the water, and these are really highly scented. So although I haven't used all spring flowers, I've got my dahlias, my roses and my peonies in there. The soft colours do definitely make it look as if I've got this Easter basket on the go. And off on the side here, I've also got some stems of contorted willow. So these would make a lovely basket as well. They're slightly more wayward than my silver birch twigs and might be harder to control. Once you've got your twig base, it may be that you might want to sort of add in another decorative detail and showcase some other stems around your container. So you could pin these in place using your paper covered wire. You may want to lay some twigs over the top, or even to give a little hint, you know, I've called it a nest. If you think it looks more like a basket than a nest, you might be able to think about feeding some of your more perhaps decorative twigs in, and that will give a way of enclosing the your flowers and just gives that sort of safe feeling to your flowers. We talk a lot about space in our arrangements and wanting things to be as large as possible and occupying the space, but sometimes it's just a matter of having something arching over the top which can make it look like it's a lovely sort of nestled in arrangement. I'm just checking on the comments there. Oh, about the moss. So you don't have any moss to fill the gaps. That's perfectly fine. You don't need moss. It's just that I have got a lot of moss left over from my Christmas dories, and I just thought it was quite a nice texture to put in because it does look a little bit like a bird's nest. So the moss isn't vital. And I think probably when you're looking at the arrangement, what you're looking at are the flowers. And because I've got a dark bowl with my twigs, actually, although there's gaps, you can't actually see anything. Perhaps if I'd had a white bowl inside, it would have been quite noticeable. But I just thought for that extra level of detail, I quite fancied having the moss there. And it just sort of spoke to me about, you know, bird's nests and springtime and looking forward to Easter. So what I'm going to do now is to say goodbye to our flower fans who are watching the recorded video. So I will stop the recording, and then I will invite you all to take yourselves off mute, and we will go to our live Q&A session. So that's all from me for now, recorded ladies, and I'll see you next time.